welcome back. Episode 7, we go again. Dublin 2023, a weekly vlog with myself, Declan, where I come onto YouTube and tell you all about my training. This is more of a personal vlog, really and truly for myself. Something that I can look back on the week of Dublin Marathon and see what training I've done and how much preparation I've done. Something that I recommend to athletes that I coach is to keep some kind of journal. Whether that's written, whether it's vlog like this here, whether it is a spreadsheet, or even just knowing that all your runs are on Strava or Garmin or whatever app that you use. Something that you can look back on the week before the marathon and look back at all those key sessions that you hit, and maybe even those sessions that didn't quite go so well, that you know that you've bounced back from, to get yourself into the best possible shape that you can be for the marathon. Nearly got those words out. So this week, this was a sharp week. This was a down week and a race week included as well. Last week I spoke about Belfast Marathon coming up, and I was in two minds of what I was going to do. So if you want to find out how that went, stay tuned and watch the rest of this video. So session 1 of week, oh my god, am I week 14 of the training block? Yeah, week 14 done, 6 weeks left. So session 1 seen me down at Meadowbank Track. I had a session of intervals to do. It was a new distance that I had never really ran before in intervals. Usually I tend to do sort of multiples of 400s, 800s, 1200s, 1600s, etc, etc. But I thought I would try 600s for a change. Just to sort of have something different, to give the legs a wee bit of a shake up, give the mind something else to think of as well. So it was 5x600s with Belfast Marathon Belfast Half Marathon in mind. I didn't want to bust myself too much. Still wasn't 100% sure of what my race strategy was going to be for that weekend. But yeah, I knew that if I did any more speed work, whatever plan I had in mind would be out the window. I would have to run it slower than I would probably anticipate. I would take the decision away from. But anyway, back to the session. Session 1 down at Meadowbank. It was quite a windy day down at the track. The conditions were nice in terms of the heat. It wasn't too warm, it wasn't cold, but it was windy on the home straight. In hindsight, I probably should have moved my start line to the other side of the track so that I didn't have to hit the home straight twice. But hey, there we go, we learn. But yeah, the 600s were done. I knew from the previous track session that I should be able to hold 620 pace. I can hold it over 800, so I should be able to hold faster than that there over the 600s. So I set out and done the first rep in 6-minute pace, which was sharp, but felt fairly comfortable. Comfortably hard is probably a good way that I would put it there, or hardly comfortable sometimes. So that was the goal, to try and get them all in or under that there. And that's what I done. I done each and every 600 rep in under 6-minute mile pace, which is sharp for me. It's sharper than 5k PB pace, but it felt good on the day, and I knew with the shorter amount of reps and the shorter rep itself, it was manageable. I think the fastest one I did was the last one as well, where it was about 5:44 pace, there or thereabouts. I'd done a 200-meter jog / walk recovery, and there was a couple of miles either side, bookending the session to bring me up to 8 miles for session 1. Session 2, it took place on Wednesday. This was the day I decided what I was going to do on Sunday. I had a 14-mile long run to do. That was what the plan said. And if I was going to do the 14-mile long run, I potentially would fatigue the legs just a little bit too much for Sunday. So I had to make this decision this day, on Wednesday, of what I was going to do. So my previous half marathon PB was set in 2019. I recorded 1:35:10 I think it was New Year's Eve or the day before New Year's Eve in 2019. Did I say 2019? Yeah. In 2019. So 1:35:10. I matched that PB in Belfast Half Marathon last year. Didn't realise I was quite so close to a PB. Potentially could have pushed a little bit harder. But anyway, I matched it. So I haven't recorded a half marathon PB in 4 years. So I knew from the miles that I've done and some of the training runs that I've done and how they have felt, that if conditions were good on the day and everything felt good in terms of physiologically, body wise, I would be in PB shape. So I decided on Wednesday to cut that long run down and did 7 miles. That 7 miles was done at a fairly easy pace, took me just over an hour, so it was 8:43. Nothing major happened, which is pretty good. There's nothing wrong with simple, easy runs with nothing to report, because it just shows that you're out there and you're getting them done. So yeah, happy enough with that one. Third session of the week was done on Thursday. This was 11 miles. I was off work on Thursday, so I had a little bit more time to route plan or do something. The initial plan was to head off and do a trail run somewhere nice and scenic. But I ended up not doing that there. I ended up just running a standard 11-mile route that I do all the time. It was on the roads. I stuck on, what shoes did I have on for this one here? The Tempo, the Nike Tempo, not the super shoes, but the Tempo ones. And they felt nice. They are a fast shoe. And the route that I chose, it's downhill to start off with, so the pace picked up a wee bit naturally, but the heart rate was very, very much under control the whole time, and I ended up running sort of anywhere between 7:50s and 8-minute miles that day. But looking at the heart rate, it felt easy. There's something about the shoes, isn't there, that makes the effort a wee bit easier. So I recorded 11 miles. It took me 1 hour 27 minutes exactly. Zero issues with it. I actually really, really enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed having the non-pressure of having to sort of get back in time, get back to work or get off to do something. I had plenty of time to go home, get showered, do all the things that you want to do after a run, eat some nice meal, etc. But yeah, that was 11 miles done, 7:55 average. Considering the day before I decided I was going to race Belfast Half in hope for a PB, did I actually hinder myself by running 11 miles a little bit sharper than I potentially should have? You'll have to wait and see. Brings me on to Friday, 4th session of the week. I text a friend of mine, Francis O'Hagan, who had planned to come in to me for a sports massage that night, and seen if he would like to come ahead an hour early and we could get a little run done. He was making his half marathon debut in Belfast, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity just to chat to him, talk to him, find out how his training had been going, and potentially give him some tips and advice and things like that there as well. Spoiler alert, he PB'd. Well done, Francis. But we chose a nice, easy 6-mile route. Nothing major, nice and flat, out and back. Weather-wise, it was damp. It was moist. The weather was, it was very, very wet that night. But yeah, it was a standard 6-mile run that I do, up the Craig Road, down the Broke Road. Pretty standard. We took it, I switched the Garmin to KMs and KMs per minute because Francis runs in that weird metric. Yeah. Whereas I prefer miles, but he wanted to know his pace, so I switched it around, and I was running by effort more than anything else. So whenever you're looking down and you're seeing 5:12 and 5:13s, it meant really nothing to me because I couldn't do the mental. I knew it was sort of over 8 minutes and under 9 minutes, but I didn't know exactly where it was at. But yeah, effort-wise, we took it fairly easy. Very, very much conversational pace. We were chatting the whole way through it. I say it was moist. Highlight of the run was whenever we were coming back, there was this dude, and he was out for a walk, and he just decided to start running along beside us. He was wearing a pair of jeans. Why he decided to start running with us, I don't know, but he was talking away, He knew my name. I don't know who he was, but he knew who I was. He was Declan this, Declan that. But he stayed with us for about 3 or 4 minutes and then just started walking again. But strange. You do meet some strange people when you're out running. But that was definitely the highlight of that run. Saturday morning shakeout run. Little bit of fatigue in the legs at this stage. What did I do? 8, 7, 11. So you're talking 15, 26, 32 miles in the legs already. All back-to-back runs. You know, you're talking speed sessions, long run, couple of recovery, sort of easy runs in there too. But shakeout run. I'm going to talk a little bit about this sort of purpose of a shakeout run and perhaps why we do them as well. So the shakeout run was done 4 miles. I was working on Saturday morning down at Belfast. So I headed down a little bit earlier. The initial plan was to go to the track and just run around the track for about 30 minutes, but I get bored of that within the first lap. I ended up taking myself up round Barnet Domain and round the towpath for anybody who knows sort of around that area, and coming back up to Mary Peter's track through the sort of trail routes. I ended up doing about 3 miles, very, very easy. I say easy, it ended up progressive, followed by some strides. I ended up doing 8 by 100 meter strides at 5k pace. I didn't want to push too hard and risk any injury here. But the shakeout, what's the purpose of the shakeout run? It is strange to think that whenever the legs are heavy and tired, that a run can make you feel better. But that's definitely the point of a shakeout run, that it helps just flush lots of fresh blood into the legs. It removes that little bit of fatigue and tiredness from them, and it reminds the body, I suppose, of the mechanics of running as well. For those that maybe travel and go away for doing marathons abroad or races abroad, and you spend a lot of time sitting down, definitely a shakeout run the day before a marathon or a half marathon or a key race is a key session to be done, but just don't overdo it. I did take this one fairly easy, and even with the strides I decided I wasn't going to push stupidly hard with them and put them out at sort of 8-9% or 8 to 9 out of 10. It was more of a 5k race pace, taking them around that sort of 6:20 effort, and it really just encourages good running mechanics, good running form, upright posture, all those good things we look for in an endurance runner. But yeah, it was a good run. I ended up working the rest of the day before heading off to the expo to pick up my race pack, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next section. Belfast Half Marathon, they don't post out the race packs, which I think for some of us who live fairly close or work close by, it's okay. You can nip over to the expo, you can call in, you can pick up your race pack. But I do understand the frustrations of a lot of runners who have to travel from further afield. Those that are maybe traveling from the south or traveling up from the north coast, etc., having to sit in a car for 1.5 to 2 hours to drive up to pick up a race pack and then spend the time driving back home again, because I suppose from a pure financial point of view it doesn't make sense to really stay over the night before whenever you're only 2 hours away, but then they have to do the same the next day, another couple of hour drive up and down again. It's not ideal the day before a marathon. I highly recommend a shakeout run if they do that. But the expo itself, it is getting better. I know there's been a few grumblings about it, but I like it. I think it's good for the city, but I do definitely think Belfast's marathon organisers should have an option for those who are further afield to get their race pack or number at least posted out to them, with the option then of coming along to the expo if they wish. Would most people pick it? I don't know, but for me, the chance to get over to the expo, walk around, chat to some of the sponsors, chat to the race organisers, chat to people that I've worked with in the past, as well as the most important thing for me whenever it comes to the expo is talking to other runners, talking to people that you know and you chat to through Facebook or social media. There was one who actually came up and spoke to me who watches this vlog, so hello. So it's a good chance to get social. A lot of times running is very much a solitary soul. It's a lonely sport. where we spent a lot of time out in the roads by ourselves. So a chance to sort of unwind the day before a race, talk to other runners, and realize that most people are feeling very similar to yourself. There's that nervous excitement in the air. And with the expo being a little bit on the smaller side compared to other city marathons or half marathons, means that you won't be clocking up loads and loads of steps walking around. You know, you can get in, you can get out within, you could get in and out within 5 minutes really, but I spent about an hour at it, chatting to the volunteers. Very big thank you to all those volunteers as well. But yeah, the expo was good. I had no complaints about it. The goodie bag, or the bag that you got t-shirt wise, was a nice t-shirt, black t-shirt. I actually tried to put it on today, but I realized it's in the washing machine, so it's not ready for this video. But yeah, it was quite a nice fitting t-shirt for myself, and a nice design as well for the 10th anniversary of Belfast Half Marathon. But beyond that there, it's pretty standard. Linwood seeds, bottle of water, packet of crisps. Unfortunately, I was not one of the ones to win a spot prize, but I know a few of my friends did win other things. But yeah, I think a little bit more work could go into that there. A few more things into the goodie bags just to make it a little bit more attractive, and perhaps people wouldn't mind coming down to the expo. If you sort of have it as the option of get your race number posted out and you get nothing extra, or come along to the expo and you get a nice big goodie bag with lots of good things in it from their sponsors and from all their local businesses who are looking to sort of share things. I think that's maybe an option available to it. But yeah, I will wrap up this section of the video because I think I've rambled on about the expo a bit too much. But overall, a nice experience. Could do with a little bit of extra sort of thought process or a bit of extra work into it, but overall I had a good time at it. So if you want to hear how the half marathon went, stay tuned, because it's going to be a pretty long section, I do believe, because there's lots to talk about. Okay, Belfast Half Marathon, 10th anniversary. This was my third running of it though. It was my first ever half marathon back in 2014. It was one of my first ever races. I think my second ever race actually. First race was the Termini 10k. But yeah, I came back to Belfast last year. Usually I think it's the Great North Run or Ultras. There usually is something else on, but I went back to it last year and I was really impressed with the routes to match my PB as well. Shown that I was gonna be in, if I'm in half decent shape, I should get rounded and fairly good. And worst case scenario, I could use it as part of a long run at marathon pace. But as I said earlier in the video, I decided on the Wednesday that I was going to give this a rattle. Thought process behind this was, I'm in good shape. It's 6 weeks out from Dublin. I want to test myself. I need to test myself. I think an old coach of mine used to say, if you're not testing, you're guessing. And you can put all the miles into training, but sometimes you just gotta line up on a start line and give it a good burst to see where you're at. So that's what the goal was, and that's what I wanted to do. So the night before, I played about with a few of the race prediction calculators. It had me in and around 134 based on where I want to be for the marathon. Garmin, very optimistic, had me at 131 and 4 seconds. Some other ones had me around the 133. I thought to myself, 135 or under gets me a PB and means I'm not absolutely wrecking myself before the marathon, because the marathon is the main goal. So I programmed into the Garmin the routes. I put in 134 as my base time, or my paced time, to allow a little bit of wiggle room should the course measure over or anything like that there, which a lot of times it does. There's GPS inaccuracies, you run wide, lots of things can happen, but it just allows that little bit of wiggle room should something happen to run a slightly faster pace, but not too much. I turned up on Sunday morning, full of excitement. I'm not going to say nerves. Excitement was definitely a thing. I knew that I was in fairly decent shape, and I knew that I could if everything goes well, I'll run that 134 to 135 pace. And yeah, so it was very, very exciting. There was lots of wet weather. It was just constantly raining on us. The weather in terms of temperature wasn't cold, but it was wet. It wasn't nice to sort of stand around in. Thankfully, I had lots of good friends there who had their gazebos and allowed me to shelter in underneath those. Chatting to lots of runners beforehand. I'm not going to start naming them because I'll miss somebody out, and I don't want to miss anybody. But lots of good friends, lots of good runners, lots of good athletes. Everybody feeling that mixture of nerves and excitement. Some people taking on Belfast Half or a half for the first time ever. Other people well seasoned at it, some using it as long runs, others using it as a chance to test themselves, a bit like myself. So lots of good chat there in the morning time. Not enough loose. A bit disappointing with that there in terms of the organisation. The race organisers did put out like a social media post, during the week as well, and they knew how many entrants they had. They knew they had 6,000 entrants. They probably know that there's going to be a drop off of 10 to 20% of that there, which is standard across most races anyway. So they knew roughly how many people are going to turn up. But during the week, to put up a social media post to say, we won't have enough toilets to cope with all competitors, please use the toilets before, or something to that effect. It just doesn't make sense. Just if you know there's going to be somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 people turning up, put more toilets out there. We are runners, we need facilities. That's the only gripe that I really have. Well, there's a couple of other wee gripes, but that's the first gripe that I'll mention, and the first one I'll probably labour too much on. But anyway, I didn't actually get to use the toilets because there was too big of a queue, and the start was about to go at 9 o'clock. So yeah, 9 o'clock, about 5:10 to 9, we start to make our way over with the hordes of runners to the start area, going out the main gates of Ormeau Park, and you turn to your right and you see the start line, and quickly realise that you're heading towards the front of the start line and not the back of the start line, and there's 3, 4, 5,000 people all heading that same direction, with a very, very narrow path to actually get you to the back of it. The signage within the park wasn't great. Nobody knew where they were going, so you go out the main entrance exit, but in fact the organisers had planned to put people out the back of the park so you join the back of it, but it just wasn't very clear. Made it, I'm going to say dangerous, can we say, we'll say dangerous, or a little bit chaotic. I'll go with chaotic. A little bit chaotic at the start, potentially bordering on dangerous with that many people trying to squeeze through, especially as everybody's thinking it's going to start at 9 o'clock. Ended up being delayed by about 15-20 minutes because of this here, but once the roads were cleared, we were able to get started off. The route itself starts on the Ormeau embankment, heads towards the city, and then you turn left and do like a wee sort of tour of Ormeau Park itself. This part of the course is twisty and it's narrow in parts as well, and it was made even more narrower, yeah, that's a word, yeah, narrower, because people were trying to avoid the puddles instead of just running through them, which was a little bit frustrating as you're sort of trying to hold a pace. But anyway, it was grand. I'll talk through the route description and then maybe talk about how I done. Then you come out of the park, you go down the Ormeau Road, up Ravenhill, you head over towards East Belfast to Victoria Park, and then you do a sort of out round a lap of Victoria Park towards the city centre. You run past City Hall before heading up towards the Falls, which is West Belfast, and then finally coming down Grosvenor Road through the sort of student area, and then back to finish on what I thought was the Ormeau embankment. But no, they actually this year brought us back up the Ormeau Road, which is up a hill, back through the park, back on the windy, twisty turns, before finishing in the park down behind the Ozone Centre. If you don't know Belfast, that means nothing to you. But those that know Belfast will know that, it's a very twisty course. There's a lot of turns in it, but it's not too hilly, which is good. So how did my race go? I was pretty lucky in terms of my starting position. I got into the pen, and I was probably about 3 or 4, maybe 5 rows back from the start line, which was very, very good for me. Not so much good for the people behind me, but I was in with my friend Lee, and pretty much said to him, we need to go out hard here because there's going to be 4,000 or 5,000 people behind us, sort of vying for space. And you want to sort of get yourself a good position going through the park because we knew there was twisty and turny from last year. So that's what I did. I went out hard. I went out at 6:40 something pace, which was not the pace that I had planned to do. So anybody that I coach, I tell them all the same race. Start your first mile or your kilometre about 10 to 30 seconds slower than goal real race pace. Settle into race pace for the next X amount of miles, and then horse it on for the last 3 to 5 miles, depending on how you feel. So going out at 30 seconds faster than goal pace was not in my plan, but it was needed because of where I had started. So I thought once I get through the park, once I get sort of a mile and a half done and back onto the Ormo Road, I will pull this pace back a little bit. I'll pull it back down to the 7:14s, 7:15s, in and around that there, and just settle into that there and enjoy that pace, and don't blow up, because that would have been PB pace for me. But once I got under the Ormo Road, I actually ended up holding the pace. I ended up holding it out at, I think it was 6:52s, then it was 7s, and then I seemed to settle in and around that sort of 6:50 to 7-minute mile pace, and it felt good. It felt comfortable. I felt in control of the pace as well. So I ended up making a decision to, okay, we'll hold this for as long as we can, and if need be, then we can pull back. Nutrition wise, don't try anything new on race day, they say. Well, Paul Marshall, who may be watching this here, if he's not, why not? But Paul gave me Vim Nutrition. He gave me a couple of samples of it and said, you'll like these. So I'd never used them in training, and didn't have anything else with me, but these were at the bottom of my backpack. So I ended up using those. Very, very impressed with those. I'll maybe do another video with those another time. But anyway, Vim Nutrition for that there. Took a couple of squares. Felt fantastic, especially the caffeine one. It seems to hit very, very quickly. But anyway, back to the race report, because this is going on long enough. Got through Victoria Park. At this stage, I had been dying from a peep from before I started the race, and I thought the feeling might be fleeting and might disappear, but it didn't. I ended up sort of playing on my mind. I thought, right, I just have to stop. I have to pee. I have to get it out because it's going to be a very uncomfortable 7 miles if I don't do so. So I ended up stopping in Victoria Park and doing the business, when I got a chance to get out of sight of everybody. I looked at the watch at this point, and it was just coming up to the halfway mark, and I had recorded 46 minutes and 31 for 6.5 miles. I think it works out. So halfway of 46:31, which is 4:24 a kilometre, which was, I think, 7-minute mile pace. Maybe a wee bit sharper. Hang on a wee second, I'll check that one out. Sorry, talking here, but anyway, I don't need to check, but you'll be able to work it out. Maybe I'll put it up on the screen if I can remember how to do that there. But yeah, it was sharper than I had anticipated to start with, but I was feeling fairly good now that I had a pee done. The uncomfortableness feeling had left me. I took another Vim and dropped it as I was running, so I had no nutrition left to get me through the next half. Thankfully, there's plenty of water stops and Powerade stops out on course as well. But yeah, came through mile 7 through Victoria Park, felt good. Mile 8, mile 9, ticked off quite nicely. It was actually a lovely flat part of the course at this stage, so able to clock off some consistent miles here as well. Mile 10 into mile 11 is a climb. I was dreading this part of the marathon. From my recollection of it last year, it was a long, draggy uphill. It felt like a mountain. The legs were pulled off me. I didn't even realize I was on it. I was running. I knew I was on the road, but I was waiting and waiting and waiting for it to get worse, waiting for the hill to kick, and it never did. Now, I did not that they flattened the roads in Belfast. I think it's just this year I'm a little bit fitter than I was last year. I've put more miles in, I've done more training, I've been a little bit more specific with my training. I ended up topping up at the getting to the top of the falls and coming down I think it's down the Grosvenor Road. But anyway, you turn to the left and it comes downhill, and I was like, oh, that's the hill over. And whatever bit of me was perhaps holding back a little bit, was released. I knew that I had sort of 5k to go at this stage. I felt good. I wasn't feeling fatigued in the legs. The breathing wasn't overly laboured. There were parts where I was maybe a little bit sharp, a little bit tense in the shoulders, which has been pointed out a few times to me, but that's standard for me. That's the way I tend to run, even though I tell everybody to run with nice low and relaxed shoulders. But yeah, once I knew I got to this point, I looked at the watch, and even at this stage I thought I can drop right back down in pace and still record a PB, but that's not what I did. I kicked on. I decided to go for it. I had the Garmin set up, as I said, for 1:34, and whenever I looked at the race time finishing predictor, because I programmed in 13.11 miles for a half marathon, it was predicting me to finish at 1:31. That's a big PB if I can hold this here, but I still had 4 minutes to play with as well. So I did. I kicked on. I dropped the pace down. I ended up coming through the next 3 miles at around 6:55, 6:52 and 6:46 pace, which was good. I ended up coming over the finish line 1 minute quicker than I did over the halfway line. So I ran negative splits. So it was 46:31 for the first half and 45:32 for the second half, giving me a brand new PB of 1:31.55. Now I know the maths doesn't add up there, but those splits are gun time as opposed to chip time. So my gun time was 1:32.03, but the chip time was 1:31.55. I actually couldn't believe it. I'm delighted with the time. I'm still buzzing from the time to record that there, considering that there were 70 plus miles in the legs from the week before, so there was no taper for this. I had 38 miles in the legs this week, including speed work and a sort of medium to long run at a fairly hard pace as well. I had run out of nutrition at the halfway mark, had to stop for a pee, and I also measured over. I measured 13.25. If you take out the stop for a pee, which was about 25, maybe 30 seconds, if you look at the difference between elapsed and moving time. And if you take the course and make it correct, not that you can ever do, but bring it down to 13.11. My watch beeped 13.11 at 1:31 and 3 seconds, I think it was. Take away that pee stop, and all of a sudden I'm down to 1:30 in a few seconds. That's agonizingly close to 1:30, and potentially something that I can target in the future now that I know that I'm fairly close to it. So happy to record 1:31.55. And I think I'm actually glad that I'm further away from the 1:30, so I'm not annoyed with it. If I had been 1:30 and 20 seconds, I probably would have been super annoyed. But course-wise, as I say, I've given the description. The last sort of event that I'm going to have on the course is the finish of it. So last year, you come off the Ormo Road and finished down the embankment, you had like a good 1k, maybe a wee bit more than a k, of a big open road to open up the legs and just go for it, and you did not have to think. This year you went up the Ormo Road and had to go back into the park, so through a set of gates, up a curb, watching bollards, through gates, up a slight hill. There were walkers around, which they're entitled to walk the park. There were other runners walking back up who had already finished. There were people standing with umbrellas impeding you. It was twisty, it was windy, there were downhills with big mucky parts on it. I was fairly lucky that there wasn't too many people around me, that I had space to run. But from talking to other people who finished it, who were finishing in groups, they found it a lot more difficult. There were a few people who had fell, tripped. There was, I think, an incident where a small kid had walked out, which, again, it's an open park. You know, the race organisers hadn't closed it, so the kids have every right to walk there, but a little bit more foresight from the organisers to perhaps close that off, put barrier tape up, something to sort of stop people walking through that there, and make it safe for those who have ran 13 miles and mentally will be fatigued, not just physically, to sort of, and are going to be pushing for times and having to think about a finish line. It's, you know, where's it at, where's it coming, whereas whenever you can see it sort of half a mile ahead of you, you can close fairly quick for them. So yeah, that's the last event about that there. So 31:55, new PB, happy. So I was talking to Stephen Todd, who I think watches this back. Well, I know he watches back because he gave me feedback on it, telling me how long the videos are at times. I started off thinking this one's going to be quite short, and I sort of I paused the camera between each section now so that it uploads and I can put different graphics in, try to make it look a little bit more professional. And I'm almost sure this is probably going to be the longest one based on the ranting and venting that I've done. But hopefully you guys have found it useful. I know whenever I look back on it, I will probably cringe at the length of it and things like that. But as I say, these are vlogs giving you everything, the warts and all. I don't sort of overly edit it. I don't script it, don't rehearse it. So you just get my ramblings coming out as they happen. I always finish these videos with a summary of the week. So last week I recorded just under 50 miles. Actually, it was 49.3 miles, which is the lowest week that I have done in this training block since week 1. Wow, where it was 43 miles. So there's been 13 weeks of consistently over 50 miles weeks, over 100k weeks, but yeah, 59.3. It was very much a race week, with all the focus going into that half marathon. So 59.3, 49.3 miles, sorry, 6.5 hours of running. Overall summary, I have now completed 809 miles in training, over 14 weeks. That is just over 118 hours. I am 21 miles behind plan, but I'm not focused on that there. Realistically, this week I should have had, I think, 67 miles in the legs or something like that there. But with that change of focus to get the half marathon done, that's where we've lost that 20 miles. I am really happy though to get the half marathon done. And I know that the next 3 weeks are going to be big mile weeks. There's a few marathon paced runs in there. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what they bring, and then we do the taper. I am going to be a little bit different this time. Last year I done a 2-week taper. This year I'm going to bring that back to a 3-week taper, but still keep the higher miles. So we're not going to reduce it down too much. So learning from our mistakes. Look guys, thanks for watching, thanks for listening to my rambling. Hopefully you do get something from this, whether it is, you know, training tips, or whatever it may be that you do get from it. It'd be interesting to hear what you take from it. But look, if you have any questions in your own training, do drop me a comment below. I hope Dublin is a success for you, because I think most people watching this are aiming for a Dublin Marathon. If you did Belfast Marathon, let me know in the comments how you did. What your thoughts were, what the race organizer could do differently as well. But yeah, we'll wrap this up. I think I've went on long enough, and I'll catch you guys next week. Bye bye.